welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ, your host, delving further down the Psychopath's bag of tricks, covering sections from Robert D Hare's book Without Conscience, The Disturbing World of the Psychopaths Among Us. The next section is entitled Flies in the Web, which is very interesting because I have often thought about these predator creatures, whether they're psychopaths or other Clustrer B monsters, and it's true. They are like a spider that weaves a web. It's a web full of lies, of course. It wraps around all kinds of people. Some stop by, fly away. Others stop by and stick around a little bit longer than they should, and then they end up trapped. Dr. Hare begins with a quote from Molière, the Miser, 1668. People can be induced to swallow anything, provided it's sufficiently seasoned with praise. This part of the book covers how these creatures appear to have a certain power over many of us. He starts it off with a story about a policeman who is standing back as a lady's getting out of her car. He had pulled her over because she had gone over 80 in a narrow rural road, and it's usually against the protocol for a traffic violator to step out of their car. That's viewed as a threat. I know because my own mother did it. She was driving and stopped by a policeman. She was sitting there in her car waiting, and I guess she was in a hurry. The police officer was taking its sweet time, and she got sick of waiting after several minutes. So she got out of her car and said, "Would you hurry up and just write the ticket?"
"Lady, get back in your car! Lady!"
She had to go back in. They're very threatened by that. However, this particular policeman knew all that. One reason is because the way the officer stands over the car and says, "Give me your license," it gives them an air of authority and a physical advantage. This lady steps out of her car ever so confidently. She's got a big smile on her face as she walks up to the policeman. She's not really that pretty, but she has direct eye contact, and that is powerfully attractive. He asks to see her license and resists any of her attempts at trying to have small talk conversation, at least for the moment. But eventually, he gives in because of her style, and he ends up writing her just a warning. After all, a boy had been killed on this very road just the previous month, he said. Then this officer watched the lady climb back into her car, and she drove away. And he was even fighting to keep himself from waving goodbye to her. Dr. Hare says that most of us accept the terms and rules of human interaction, but there always seem to be certain people who use their appearance and their charm, whether it's natural or fake, to convince others to do their will. And in each case, the victims, in quotes, needs and vulnerabilities help to determine the outcome of this particular exchange. Usually the outcomes are relatively harmless, just part of everyday interactions with others. But in cases where you're dealing with a psychopath or an evil Clustrer B monster, the impact on the victim can be catastrophic. These creatures tend to see any social exchange as some kind of a feeding opportunity. It's a contest, or it's some kind of test of will in which there is only going to be one winner. And guess who that will be? Their motives are to manipulate and take, ruthlessly and without any kind of remorse. Showtime. Although these creatures do talk a lot, they're not always the most skilled of wordsmiths. Primarily what we react to is the show. It's not an eloquent use of any fancy language that attracts our attention or cons us. It's good looks, a touch of charisma, a flood of words, phony distraction, a knack for knowing just which buttons to press. All of these can go a long way towards obscuring the fact that these creatures' presentation is nothing more than a line. A nice-looking, fast-talking psychopath and a victim who has weak spots is a devastating combination. If the creature's show is not enough, there'll be the use of stage props, phony credentials, a fancy car, fancy clothes, a sympathy-inducing role, and so on, will usually complete the job. Of course, these creatures are not the only ones capable of theatrical displays. We all know others who are always on stage, or flamboyant, given to the use of verbal and gestural exaggerations and gimmicks. Many of these interactions with others are shallow and insincere, designed to make a good impression, to make their self-image look a little better, or to achieve professional or political goals. But unlike these creatures, their intention is not simply to suck others dry. Our society runs on a form of trust, and we ordinarily pay more attention to what somebody says than to the accompanying nonverbal behavior, such as hand gestures, facial movements, smiles, eye contact. However, when the speaker is attractive and gives a really good, impressive nonverbal performance, the effect can be reversed. We watch the show and don't really pay attention to what they're saying. We've covered before how these creatures do sometimes make effective use of their body language when they're speaking. Often it is hard not to follow their actions with our eyes. These creatures also tend to intrude into our personal space. For example, by an intense eye contact, or leaning really close to you, forward, moving closer, and so on. Overall, their display can be so dramatic or unnerving that it serves to distract, impress, control, or intimidate us, which draws our attention away from what they're actually saying. Quote,
I didn't follow everything he said, but he said it so beautifully. He has such a gorgeous smile,
said a lady who'd been built by one of these psychopaths that they had studied. One of Dr. Hare's former colleagues was trapped in a web of passion and deceit that was spun by a wicked wife that he was sure was a psychopath. He stated,
"She made my life a living hell, but I feel bereft without her. She was always doing something exciting, something outrageous even. She would disappear for weeks at a time without ever really explaining where she'd been. We went through a load of money, all my savings, the mortgage on the house, but she made me feel really alive. My mind was always messed up when she was around. I couldn't think clearly about anything but her."
The marriage ended painfully for this guy, and she moved in with another man.
"She didn't even leave a note,"
he had told Dr. Hare. There's also a little section in gray here. The props that these creatures, you could call them imposters, use seem bizarre, even stupid to a lot of people. But there is no shortage of eager believers. For 6 years, this guy named Ed Lopez, who was a 56-year-old man, posed as a Baptist minister who had found God on death row. This creature claimed to have had a 15-year career as a mafia hitman for Murder Incorporated, during which he had executed 28 people. Nevertheless, he told his flock of sheep and other church groups throughout Washington state that he'd been counseled by Billy Graham, and petitions from 350 prison employees persuaded the parole board to let him go free. Recently unmasked, this guy admitted to being a parole jumper from Illinois who had strangled his second wife, beaten to death another lady, and stabbed and choked one of his girlfriends. His congregation's response? Some of the members were upset, but others raised the funds for his bail, which was set at a surprisingly low $5,000, and rallied to his support. The court quickly had second thoughts about the low bail and returned him to jail to await proceedings for return to Illinois. This came from the Associated Press. Who knows if it's true? But if it is, it fits. The next section we'll cover is about buttons. They love to press those buttons. They find your weaknesses, they will exploit them. And they'll do it with a smile on their face, and if you dare to question, "Are you exploiting my buttons?"
Oh, you're crazy and paranoid. I would never do that.
So stick around. Like and subscribe if you choose.
I am the Narcopath of your wildest dreams.
I can't help but notice you were asking questions when you finally saw some of the games I was playing.
And you wanted to know why I'd play such childish games. After reading TJ's book that I'm about to burn, one of the sections is actually called, Do They Grow Out of It? Honey, since I'm given the confession, I never grew out of it. I'm still playing the same games today that I was playing at the age of 7. I learned how to manipulate men to get what I wanted, and it worked. It still works. Look at you. You were there for me, weren't you? I was fully developed at the age of 7. That is who I am, and that's who I'm gonna be. Accept it. I never developed any kind of emotions. I just go after what I want, get it, and then move on to the next target. My life is so much better than yours. Mind your own business.
Yeah, as I said.
I am a chameleon. I change for my target. Is that so hard to understand?
I know it indicates I don't have a real self, but
Who needs that trash when I get whatever I want?
those real people out there don't get everything they want, and I do.
So I think it's worth it to be empty inside and to be able to be whomever I want for whatever I want. And I always get it. I got you, didn't I?
Well, now I'm on to the next.
He doesn't know it yet, but he's gonna fall in love with me. We're gonna get married. I'm gonna tell him that I'm on birth control, because he doesn't like kids, but I'm gonna become pregnant. It'll be a surprise. And once I have those babies, he'll have to keep me forever. And if he doesn't, I'll go to his family and say, "Oh, how could your son abandon his pregnant wife who's having a child? What kind of family are you?" And I will get them to get you, keep me. I need your money. See?
I need to be a double D before winter.
It's not gonna happen unless you work out for me. So,
Keep that in mind.
you're mine for life. Like it or not.
Well, I hope you're proud of yourself. You think you interfered in my wedding?
I heard about all the lies you were telling people. You almost had them convinced. I know that the newspaper said that our wedding was off, but honey, that's not true. I thought you should know. We're still getting married. That's just a distraction for the public.
Don't think you've won. I found my Mr. Right. You couldn't be it.
That's not my fault, honey, that's yours. Don't try to interfere in our relationship again. We are in love. Whatever that is. Ah!